And without further ado,
Good evening. This is one of my 5 things that I have to do this week, so thank you for participating. Look, first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming. Last November 5th, we had an election, and it's the honor of my life to represent you in Congress and to win a contract extension from you. So thank you for putting your trust in me. I'm so grateful. Obviously, we had a bigger election at the presidential level, and while my candidate did not win, the current president won fair and square. And at that time, I said I will do everything to cooperate where I can, but I will oppose him where I must. And unfortunately, I've had to oppose him on a number of different policies. I'll just tell you about a few of them, and I'd like to hear what you think. I strongly oppose the executive order banning birthright citizenship. I also oppose the executive order that would freeze federal funding and have rolling freezes throughout the government. I oppose, while I strongly support efforts to make our government more efficient, to cut waste wherever we can, I oppose the way it's being done by Elon Musk. I oppose the gutting of agencies, the laying off of 80,000 people at the VA, and today the dismantling of the Department of Education.
Yes.
On foreign policy, I stand with Ukraine and I oppose. We must stand with democracy. And as a consequence, I had to oppose the continuing resolution. And now we are about to see a process called the budget reconciliation process, in which we are about to see suggested spending cuts of upwards of $2 trillion to our safety net. I'm a child of food stamps, and I'm a child of public housing. And so to see the possibility that we could cut upwards of $1 trillion from Medicaid and $300 billion from SNAP and food stamps is wrong.
Dead wrong. Dead wrong.
But what I want to do is address your questions. And so I'm so honored that you took time on this very, very, very challenging weather night to come here. And I want to introduce our panelists. We have 3 excellent panelists to talk about a number of issues. We have, first of all, Cecilia Mendoza to talk about immigration matters. We have Diane Slezak to talk about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And finally, we have Robert Husen to talk about Veterans Affairs and veterans issues. That's a big topic of concern. So with that, I'm going to allow Leslie and... Oh, sorry, one last thing. Okay, I have the best staff in Congress. The very best. And so if you have any questions, if you have any problems, if you have any constituent concerns, either you, your family, your friends, your organization, your business, come to us tonight. We're all here. I think every one of us is here tonight. And so you can come to me, you can come to any of us, And of course, you can share our information with others. At this point, I shouldn't tell you this, but we actually don't screen people anymore based on where you live. Because after COVID, we found that people were hurting all over, and we could not say no to anybody. So if somebody needs help, come to us and we'll do our best. Again, I don't care if you voted for me or against me. We have to help you. That is
Thank you.
That's my duty. Okay, let me turn it back to Leslie and let's get the questions started.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for the incredible array of questions. We have a whole stack of questions relating to the first topic that we're going to start with. And this one says it all. What are you and the other Democrats going to do to protect and save our Social Security as well as our Medicare?
Yes.
It's our money. Why does Musk have access to it at all?
Yeah.
Starting with the easy questions. Okay. Look, you're absolutely right. Social Security is your money. This is not an entitlement program. These are earned benefits. Am I right about that? Yeah. You put money into it. Yeah. You put money into it, and now you, at retirement age, just as my parents, you get to enjoy the benefit of that. Now, what I'm very concerned about with the Social Security Agency, and I'd like to hear what Diane has to say about this, but 7,000 people are about to be laid off at the Social Security Agency. That is going to affect real people. How?
Yeah.
Well, one of the changes that just got announced by DOJ is that they are no longer going to necessarily verify people online or over the phone. They're going to require people to come to field offices. But now they're cutting field offices.
Exactly.
And so I'm just like, this is wrong. Not only Medicare, but I want to just touch on Medicaid for 1 second because it does affect Medicare. Medicaid, as you know, is for the poorest among us. But it's also for people in nursing homes. It funds 50% of all births in the country. And there are people who are dual eligible, meaning they are both on Medicaid and Medicare. So if your Medicaid is cut, you could potentially have a situation where people who were getting their dental, vision, or some other type of service from Medicaid no longer receiving it, and then having their health conditions worsen, so then it increases the Medicare cost. So Diane, can you just speak about this for a second?
I'd be happy to. Just to start with, we just completed a detailed needs assessment of older adults in suburban Cook County with an emphasis on those who speak English less than very well. 51% of our respondents said that navigating Social Security, even before all these reductions were made, was very difficult for them, and many of them had problems. Of those who earn less than $25,000 a year, 60% of older adults have a hard time. So we are headed in the opposite direction of where we need to go. And our agency hears every day from errors that are made, and if they're human beings working at Social Security, they're going to make mistakes. But if there are fewer people there to correct them, we are going to have a harder time. We hear about these stories every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Next question.
We had some interesting news that came across the wire this afternoon.
The question was, what are you going to do?
Sorry. What are we going to do? That's a good question. Okay, so this is what we have to do with regard to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. There are 4 things that we have to do. First of all, we absolutely have to lift our voices and shine a light on all of these potential abuses that are about to happen, especially Medicaid. I keep bringing that up because that is clearly in the crosshairs. Secondly, we have to continue to pursue litigation, both inside Congress and outside. That's extremely important in conjunction with states' attorneys generals and non-governmental organizations. Third, we have to use our votes. And that is why it was so disappointing what happened with regard to the CR, because we had leverage, and we gave up the leverage. And fourth and finally, we have to hold people accountable. This is not a political statement.
No, it's not.
You have to hold me accountable. But you have to hold all of us accountable. You have to point out to people very clearly at the start, what are the harms that are about to happen if they were to cast their votes in favor of X? And if they were to do that, what would happen to them if they proceeded? It's just that simple. And you have to do it not just with me, but with everybody. Are you with me on that? This is extremely important. I need your help on this.
As many of you may know, if you're watching the news, this afternoon the news broke that President Trump is to sign an order dismantling the Department of Education tomorrow.
Yeah. Yes.
We have a whole stack of questions. This one is very illustrative of this. My wife and I are both public educators. What do you think we will be facing in the coming months regarding education?
So, okay, Department of Education, it is crucial. It is crucial in so many ways. As you know, Department of Education administers Title I. Title I is what basically makes up for the fact that in many poor areas in the country, whether you're in urban Chicago or in downstate rural Illinois, you don't have the property tax base to support all the children who are going to school there. Title I makes it possible for people to learn. But it's beyond Title I. We also administer our career technical education programs. We administer the training programs for teachers. The Department of Education is not just some bureaucracy that has no impact. It has a profound impact. We have to stop this. I need you again. I keep saying this over and over again. We have to lift our voices. I know some people are scared of lifting their voices up. Don't be scared. You have to stand up. If you don't stand up, I've made a career of standing up to bullies. I know that when you show fear or if your bully knows that you're afraid, they will prey on you. And that is what's happening now. We cannot allow this to continue with the Department of Education or any agency. I believe in cutting waste, but this manner of draconian cuts that will harm people is wrong.
Congressman, what more are you doing to protect the vulnerable population of immigrants in our community?
Okay, thank you. I've talked so much. I'm going to come back to that. Cecilia, please tell us what's going on with immigration.
There's a lot going on with immigration. I want to provide a little bit of background on the National Immigrant Justice Center to start, to give you context. Thank you. The National Immigrant Justice Center is an organization that provides legal services directly to immigrants and refugees. And our client work is further supported by a network of pro bono attorneys. And we also have very strong policy advocacy and litigation teams. So we are able to not only represent people one-on-one, but also take the experiences of our clients, of their communities, and raise that at the policy level, federal, local as well, and also at the litigation level. And there's a lot to say about what's going on with immigration. Clearly, there have been direct attacks against immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers. Several of the executive orders on day one were directly attacking these populations and making it very, very difficult for someone to be able to ask for asylum. There has been very intentional fear-mongering and attacks on communities that have been established and have been contributing to our communities for a very long time. And a lot of communities are living in fear. And so I am glad to have this opportunity to join you to be able to answer your questions and speak more about specific areas and things that haven't been happening, as there's been a lot.
Let me address this. I'm an immigrant. I'm one of the few naturalized citizens in Congress. Okay? I believe that we have to fix the border. There's no doubt about that. We have to fix that border. We have to fix our legal immigration system. Also, recently I participated in a hearing where I had a chance to question mayors of big cities and basically what is required of cities. And I agree with this. We need to remove criminals. We need to remove those with deportation orders. But raiding schools, hospitals, and churches is not going after criminals. that is fear-mongering. That's wrong. We must do whatever we can to cooperate with the federal government and provide it with the resources to remove those who don't belong here. However, our immigration system is our killer competitive app as a country. This is what makes us exceptional. Your ancestors and myself and my family made this country what it is today. And we have to continue to build that system. We can't tear it down. So let's work together and make that happen.
With the current administration defying court orders, what recourse does Congress or other parties have in making sure the law is upheld?
Do you have another question? Okay.
Actually, I do. Who do you have winning the NCAA men's championship?
Okay, let me take that one first. Illinois, right? Okay, I just made my brackets today. I shared it with my team. Yes, last time I did this, John Williams on WGN Radio made light of my choices, so I expect that's going to happen again. Okay, let's go back to the other question. I know it's very serious. Look, I'm very concerned about defiance of court orders. I mean, at the end of the day, our system of democracy works because of the rule of law. It doesn't matter, again, whether you're Democrat or Republican, independent. One thing that unifies us, or should, is that when a court decides, again, it doesn't matter if it was a Trump appointee, an Obama appointee, it doesn't matter. When they rule, you follow their orders. Am I right about that? That's just basic, because that's what separates us from other countries. Where there's disorder, where there's chaos, where there's lawlessness, we can't have that. Am I right about that? That's basic. Okay. So far, I'm watching the Trump administration very closely. Some people say that the Trump administration has not been defying court orders because the Supreme Court has not ruled on something and the Trump administration has kind of defied the Supreme Court. What I'm concerned about is at the lower levels, at the lower courts, the district courts, when a court makes an order, that the Trump administration continues to follow that. And so I'm monitoring it as closely as I can. The amount of news that's coming at us and litigation news is pretty voluminous, and so I'm going to continue to. My hope is that the court of public opinion will continue to be on our side on this particular issue.
Congressman, I have a two-part question relating to veterans' benefits and services. With the cuts in both personnel and money, the first part of the question is, what services do you think will suffer most in Illinois regarding veteran services in both medical and other kinds of services?
Got it. Okay, so let me just step back for a second. Caleb, where's Caleb? He was here. He was the one who did the Pledge of Allegiance. He's my veteran fellow. And to all the veterans in the audience, thank you for your service. On a separate note, on March 28th, I am having an event basically welcoming home veterans of the Vietnam era because it's the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam era. Now, let me get to the issue of, there's Caleb. Let me say hi. So, okay. With regard to veterans benefits, what my biggest concern is when they talk about 80,000 layoffs at the VA, my brother was a VA doc, and I think many of you have seen what services that the VA provides. It provides everything from help with people who have service-connected disabilities, prosthetic replacements, help with traumatic brain injury. We have so many people who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan who really need help and go every week to the VA for assistance. My concern is that those 80,000 layoffs are going to affect some of those frontline employees, especially who assist these people. And so with that, I want to ask Robert to please talk a little bit about what he's hearing and seeing on cuts to the VA and veterans benefits.
Good evening, everyone. The cuts that we're seeing that's proposed to the federal VA are just that federal benefits and federal employees. I work for the state of Illinois, so we don't have those effects. Do not affect us in that type of way. But what I'm here to say is that we are here for all the Illinois veterans. We have 2 local offices here, one in Schaumburg, one in Palatine, and none of our benefits or services are affected at this time. The federal benefits may or may not be as far as the cuts with the VA, but no matter if you're race, creed, political affiliation, what have you, you can visit one of our 75 veteran service officers in the state of Illinois, and they haven't been affected at this time.
So Doug Collins, who's the Secretary of the VA, asserts that there will be no cuts to benefits. However, I have a hard time understanding how when you have 80,000 people laid off from the VA, that veterans won't be affected. And so this is going to be an ongoing source of concern for me. Last point, you've heard DOJ laying off 200,000 people, all these probationary employees. A disproportionate share of those employees are veterans.
Yeah.
They are some of the best and the brightest you could possibly have as employees. And they get hired by the federal government into all the agencies as a priority. Why? Because they show up to work on time. They do the work. They stay the whole day. They have high integrity. They're people of character. Why the hell would you lay these people off? And yet that's what's happening in the name of cost cutting. It doesn't make sense. I believe in cost cutting. I was a small business person before I came to Congress. I signed the front of the check and the back of the check. And I believe very much that there's waste in the government. There's no doubt about it. But the way you deal with that is you have to do it in a bipartisan manner. And you have to do it in a way that's predictable, that is consistent with the law, and that will root out the waste without hurting people who rely on the services that those agencies provide. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
So let's do that. Let's not do this version of cost cutting.
The second part of this question, this particular constituent writes, my 94-year-old mother receives widow's benefits from her deceased spouse who is a veteran. How will widows and survivors' benefits be affected by the cuts?
This is the same issue, a little bit of what I've said before. The current secretary says there will be no cuts to the benefits. Let's see if that's correct. But I go back to what I said before. If you have those types of layoffs, it's going to affect benefits. The same thing as Social Security. If you're going to have 7,000 people laid off from the Social Security Administration, and then you drive everyone to in-person verification of their identity, you can imagine what's going to happen at the same time that you're cutting field offices. People are not going to have the opportunity to sign up for their Social Security and potentially their other benefits as well.
Congressman, how many of your Republican colleagues are on the fence and may be willing to stand up to the Trump administration?
Zero.
I don't know. I have this is the way I look at it. Look, this is where I was talking about those 4 things, and the 4th part is the accountability part. I think we have to make sure that we communicate very clearly with our Democrats, Independents, and Republicans in Congress and Senate, everywhere, and tell them what we want. And for instance, when I voted against the continuing resolution, the reason I voted against the continuing resolution is that if I voted for it, I was giving consent to what was going to happen after. And the very next day, DOJ dismantled 7 agencies, right after the CR went into effect. And so, right now, what we have to say to our friends, there may be a John McCain among them. I don't know. There may be people who are, have you heard of Profiles in Courage?
Yeah.
It was slim for a reason. And I think that now is the time where we call upon our friends to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. We cannot support. And so we want to hold people accountable wherever we can.
What can be done regarding Citizens United to stop billionaires giving millions to campaigns?
Oh my God. It will go down like Dred Scott as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in history. Why? Just for your background, Citizens United allowed for unlimited corporate money to be spent supporting or opposing candidates. Okay? We have never seen anything like what Elon Musk did in this particular election. We've never seen this amount of money come from one individual in one election cycle. And so I believe the only way that we can deal with Citizens United is we have to amend the Constitution. Or someday the Supreme Court has to overturn that decision. But one way or the other, Citizens United must go.
Let's go back to immigration for a moment or two. How will the proposed Muslim ban affect visitor visas? In other words, visitors from foreign countries coming to the U.S. for short periods of time? And how will it affect pending immigrant visas from those from affected countries?
Maybe I'll set it up, and then Cecilia, you want to speak about it? Okay. So, all right. Here's the deal. When President Trump first took office in 2017, in the very first week of his administration, he put in place what's called a Muslim ban, which was basically not allowing entry of people from certain countries, even if they were potentially legal permanent residents of the United States returning from abroad. And so, unfortunately, many of us had to go to O'Hare International Airport to help free a couple dozen Muslim green card holders who were stuck there who weren't allowed to return. That was struck down by the Supreme Court, and later on another version of that Muslim ban came up, and now President Trump wants to bring that version, whatever the Supreme Court blessed, back into being. What it would do is it would set up a system where from certain countries, he would essentially ban entry of nationals from those countries, and then for other countries, he would subject them to extreme vetting. One of those countries, by the way, that's in the second list is Pakistan. And by the way, we have numerous constituents from our district who are Pakistani Americans, not to mention from all over the world. But what happened last time when that particular ban went into place, it really harmed commerce. It harmed our ability to reunite families, to bring people here as immigrants or non-immigrants. But Cecilia, can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, definitely. We're also hearing the same thing. I will share that as of a couple hours ago, there hasn't been official text as to what exactly are going to be the practical effects of this new ban. So there's still a little bit of gray in the sense of we don't know exactly how this is going to impact, but it is something that we've seen before. And as soon as that official text comes through, definitely going to be analysis. Definitely recommend talking to your attorney to represent your representation at that point to see what the best avenues, what your options are for your family members. And it definitely highlights the impact this administration is having is not around their messaging around immigrants are criminals. It's that they're attacking families. These policies are impacting families, our neighbors, our teachers, our business owners. It's impacting our community in a very, very negative way, and that's what we need to be continuing to talk about and highlighting because this is very detrimental.
All right. I'm aghast at the direction the U.S. has taken regarding Ukraine, but I feel a sense of powerlessness because it seems the president largely drives foreign policy. Are there concrete steps you can take to suggest to us how to help improve the situation there?
Okay, so with regard to Ukraine, I'll just back up for 1 second. I thought the way that Volodymyr Zelensky was treated in the Oval Office
That was
was
horrible.
absolutely disgraceful and appalling.
That was disgusting.
We should never treat anyone like that.
Never.
But certainly, what it appeared to me to be is we're siding with a communist dictatorship over a freedom-loving democracy. It makes all of us less safe.
Yes. Putin is a BFF.
It makes all of us less safe. Because what happens is it emboldens Putin. It emboldens him. He looks at this like, oh my gosh, and now it's open season. It's open season, not only on Ukraine, but on other countries in Europe. And the worst part of it is if it involves one of our NATO allies, all of a sudden we are embroiled in the conflict. On top of that, China and Xi Jinping is watching this like a hawk. Because they would like to, quote unquote, reunify with Taiwan. So when they see what's happening in Ukraine where we abandon a country or appear to be abandoning a partner or a freedom-loving democracy, well, guess what? It invites aggression. When you show weakness, it invites aggression. And when they take aggression, then we have the possibility of hostilities. And so I think that this whole situation with Ukraine, we're sliding closer to conflict as opposed to away from it. Now, President Trump, I actually support, in principle, the notion of a negotiated armistice, negotiated truce, whatever you want to call it, to end the fighting. I agree with that in principle. However, the details matter. And so I, for instance, am much more interested in supporting a truce or armistice that would allow for Ukraine to be able to get security guarantees wherever they can, and for them to be able to join the EU and to be integrated into Europe. Are you with me on that? Yes. So in Congress, we will have some say with regard to appropriations. And so I think this is one area, whether it's intelligence appropriations or defense appropriations, where there will be voices. I'm very hopeful some Republicans will also join us on this, where we fence money depending on what the conditions are for our support for Ukraine.
Let's move a little closer to home on this next question. What is being done to protect our personal information that DOJ has access to?
Oh my God.
Yes, that 19-year-olds get a hold of.
So I feel that I think there's a lot of violations going on here. Okay, a court has now temporarily prevented DOJ from accessing data at the Fiscal Payment Service, as well, that's at the Department of Treasury, as well as at the Social Security Administration. But they keep going after data at all these different agencies.
Yeah. Why?
And they probably have mined a lot of the data. And what bothers me the most is, remember, the people that are accessing this data have not cleared security clearance checks,
Right.
have not been vetted, have not filed public disclosure forms.
One got
To this
fired for
day,
disclosing
Elon
another
Musk,
piece of
still, we don't know all of his conflicts of interest, and there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so there's a court order preventing some of this. But what I would say, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for saying this, but I have to say it. You know how I was talking about using votes as leverage? We have to use votes as leverage with regard to DOJ. We just have to.
But how?
So, for instance,
Say that, but how?
I think what's going to happen. Again, Donald Trump doesn't talk to me, but this you're
not his
It's really
BFF.
true. And so, this is what I think is going to happen with regard to the reconciliation process. Okay, so stick with me for a second. Okay, 1. They need to go through the reconciliation process to do those $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and spending cuts and that deficit spending. $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, $2 trillion in spending cuts, and $2.5 trillion in deficit spending. They also need to raise the debt ceiling in order to do that, because I told you about the deficit spending that has to happen. I don't see how they can do that without our votes. I don't
Tell
see.
that to Chuck Schumer.
However,
Tell that to Chuck
I think-
Schumer.
I think what's very important is now itself, we have to get on the same page as to what our conditions are going to be. We can't be in a situation where at the last minute we fold.
No. Yeah, that's
We can't be in a situation where we give it away. And if
We
we do
already
that,
are.
well, not yet. There's still an opportunity. We can't stop fighting. If we stop fighting, we give in. We can't do that. So this is our opportunity. But it's going to take resolve. I'm going to need you to be with me on these votes. This is a dangerous time because we're talking about the debt ceiling. We're not talking about a shutdown is horrible. A debt ceiling crisis could be even worse. However, we have to use our leverage. Because at the end of the day, we can't have a situation where we just give runway and then all of a sudden all these other bad things happen once it gets the debt ceiling increased. So that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. So I need you to back me up on this.
Now, Dick Durbin to answer his telephone.
On a little more granular question.
I just got in a lot of trouble just now, so my staff is looking at me like, what did you just say?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. A little bit more granular question here. What can be done about Johnson & Johnson doing a Texas two-step to not have to pay the settlements that are owed due to their toxic baby powder?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Huh?
Okay, I actually know something about this because I was the one that went after Johnson & Johnson for this particular issue. My investigation led to the result that it was found that their talcum powder, the white baby powder, is carcinogenic. And it caused a lot of problems for millions of people in the United States and around the world. Johnson & Johnson promptly, after our investigation happened, decided to create another company. And they spun off the baby powder into that company, and that had all the liabilities associated with the litigation.
Yikes.
And the rest of the company continued. And so then they drove that company with all the liabilities into bankruptcy. And so the people who had claims, valid claims for exposure to this carcinogenic baby powder were left high and dry. So I and Elizabeth Warren introduced legislation to prevent this from happening. It's hard to pass right now. But we got to keep fighting because this is one of those issues where they're real people. I have to digress for a second. This is one of a number of investigations that I conducted that has yielded results, although it takes time. With regard to Juul, perhaps you know about the e-cigarette and the vaping epidemic. I went after Juul because they preyed on our children with vapes. I went after food companies because they preyed on our babies with toxic heavy metals. I've stood up to the Chinese Communist Party, which targets me. I have a track record of standing up to bullies. Bullies prey on people who are fearful. We cannot show fear in the face of anything that's happening right now. We have to be strong, whether it's with regard to Johnson & Johnson or anyone else. Are you with me on this?
That's right.
What can be done to protect grants, funding for cancer research, for example, at universities, small private schools, and other critical projects such as community project funding?
Wow. Okay, Diana, I'm trying to get you in here. None of these questions touch on Medicaid and Medicare, which I hope somebody's going to ask about. But there's a lot packed in there. Okay, let me just first talk about community project funding, okay? Do you guys know what community project funding is? Show me. Okay, community project funding, we have managed to, they used to be called earmarks, but they were streamlined in a bipartisan manner. There's a lot of transparency brought to bear on them, and they've done a lot of good. So we've funded, for instance, a new fire station in Itasca. We've funded the removal of lead lines in Elgin. We've managed to help fix the sewer system in Hanover Park and in Rosemont, or we're trying. So that's what this money is being directed toward. Now, We just got the okay for that community project funding, which we had obtained for fiscal year 2024. So that's okay. That's going to come. Fiscal year 2025 project funding has been canceled under this continuing resolution, and that's one of the reasons why I voted against it. It wasn't a continuing resolution of anything. It basically canceled a bunch of things in the process. One of them is this. Fiscal year 2026, we're hopeful that we can get support again for that process. Okay, now with regard to grants, for this year we're about to put out a grants newsletter, under Leslie's direction, telling you what grants are back on the table as far as we know at this point. So please look out for that newsletter. And then finally, with regard to NIH, sorry, I'm going to digress for a second here. This is the dumbest thing ever. Yeah. Cutting grants to our scientists and our researchers who are trying to discover cures to diseases. Are you kidding me?
$50 billion to space.
Yeah, but sending. I'm a little bit of a space buff, which I'm okay with space exploration, but don't cut the funding for a cure for cancer. Don't cut the funding for a cure for type 1 diabetes. Don't do it.
Cut his golfing.
Someone said cut his golfing. Okay, well, I was gonna say Doge ought to look at the White House, but that's another story. Okay, here's my point, which is this. Here's my point. Look, we are in a competition with the rest of the world. I sit as the ranking member of this China committee. It has this huge name, but it's basically about competition with China. But really, it's about competition with the rest of the world. We can't possibly win that competition if we're cutting funding for the basic research into the technologies of the future, whether it's in biotech, whether it's in curing diseases, whether it's in artificial intelligence or nanoscale computing or quantum computing, whatever it is, we got to be funding that because that's funding the future. We can't. That is not waste. That is our future prosperity. That is what my children, your children, our grandchildren are going to rely on. So I hope that we can, on a bipartisan basis, come back to our senses on this. And I'm going to continue to fight for NIH granting funding. Interestingly, my hometown of Peoria was affected. We have, and Priya, I didn't even, can you stand up and say hi for a second? I'm so sorry. I forgot to introduce her. So look, she mentioned this to me, and I saw it, and I verified, but like the USDA is cutting its funding into future strains of soybean, future strains of other crops. It's affecting the research center in Peoria, which is where I'm from. This is dumb because our farmers need that assistance. We haven't even talked about tariffs yet. Maybe there's a question about that.
Please.
Anyway, go ahead. Let's get Diane involved.
Next card.
Okay.
I'm concerned about what's happening with Medicare for the elderly and other services that allow seniors to age in place and in good health. What can we do?
Well, Medicare and Medicaid are of great concern. SNAP benefits, the thousands of older people that are served through Medicare. And one thing I want to mention that's little known is this push from the current administration to push Medicare Advantage plans at the expense of all other plans. And I just would like to hear your voices about that because we have been, our office just gets so many complaints about when push comes to shove and you can't get some of the, they can be good for some people who can't afford anything else, but you really need to be very careful. So a push towards turning the whole system into a Medicare Advantage system.
Insurance companies.
Yeah, so here's Medicare Advantage. Just so everybody knows what Medicare Advantage is, I think a lot of you do. But essentially, basically what it is the government, I don't want to say outsourcing, but it's kind of outsourcing our Medicare system in certain parts to private health insurance companies to administer Medicare. And so the theory behind it was, okay, let's have private health insurance companies administer it and then offer additional services, dental, hearing, vision services, in addition to the usual Medicare services. But what has happened with a lot of companies, unfortunately, is two things. One, guess what they do? They deny coverage.
Yes.
That's like the favorite, those are the favorite words that you hear from insurance companies. Denial of coverage, denial of coverage. So they deny coverage left, right, and center. So that's one problem. And remember, Medicare is something that we count on for our seniors. Secondly, the other thing that's happening, and this really, really bothers me, and Elizabeth Warren and I, again, teamed up on this. There's fraud happening where they are basically, you can't believe it, can you? They are actually billing for stuff that wasn't done. And they're reaping the revenue from that. Meanwhile, the senior is like wondering, like, what the heck's that about? I never got a hip replacement, or whatever, or tests. Yeah. And so this is kind of, they're getting it going and coming. So this is a big problem.
I would really like you all to look at your explanation of benefits. Age Options runs a program called the Senior Medicare Patrol Program. Mm-hmm. So far, we have not lost funding for that program, but we have older adults who are able to help you, and you can call our line if you see something a service that you never received.
Yeah.
The only other thing I want to say is when you are signing up for Medicare and you see Medicare Part C, that is the Medicare Advantage part of
Right.
Part C.
Right.
Okay, so Part C.
HMO.
Okay.
So Part A, Part B, most of you have heard of. Part C would be Medicare Advantage. And then, we just want choice. Some people are going to choose a Medicare Advantage plan, but we don't want to eliminate choice of older adults. And we want to eliminate the profit. That's exactly what we're seeing in individual clients that come to us.
Got it. So basically, watch out for Part C. If you have any questions, go to Age Options or come to us. Next question.
Should Tesla protesters be prosecuted?
No. Yeah, that's us.
I hope not.
They should be rewarded.
Who owns a Tesla here?
No.
Just by show of hands. Nobody wants to
Nobody
admit it.
owns
wants
a
to admit, I know you have a Tesla. I don't have one. But okay. This is like one of the most fascinating things that we're seeing right now with Tesla. Have you seen Tesla stock? It's like sliding down like crazy. The world's richest man may not leave the world for such. And so this is what happens. Karma is a you-know-what. And like, karma. Oh, that's pretty funny. That's funny. Okay, look. Here's the deal, guys. You should buy whatever you want. However, just remember who gets the benefit from your purchases. Rivian is an Illinois company. I'm not doing an advertisement, okay? But I'm just telling you your options, okay? With regard to prosecution, no. People should not be prosecuted for expressing their First Amendment rights. If they engage in violence, yes. But if it's just speech, no.
But we're getting threatened. Freedom of speech.
How do you think you'll navigate the tariffs with China?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, let's end the tariffs on Canada. We have a situation where, look, I am so... The Wall Street Journal, which is no liberal newspaper, called this the dumbest trade war in history. Why? Why? Because so many companies in Illinois, especially, are importing components from across the border from Canada to then put into their products to export back to Canada and the rest of the world. And so what they're seeing, whether they're auto companies or whether they are farmers who are importing fertilizer, is they're basically getting whacked in multiple ways. One way is through the higher prices on the imports. Another way is the retaliatory tariffs that are going to be imposed on their exports. Okay? So, that old adage, the way to make a small fortune in farming is through having a big one? To start with. Is very true today. Our farmers are seeing declining income, and now, because of these tariffs, we're seeing farmers really going into big trouble. So, okay, with regard to China, I agree with strategic tariffing where there is economic aggression, especially where there's dumping of products, meaning a steel producer, a glass producer, an EV producer is actually dumping products at beneath the cost of production in order to drive out of business their competition, especially in the United States. Strategic tariffing makes sense to level the playing field, okay? But where there's not aggression, where there's no behavior that you want to change, and you just put blanket tariffs, well, guess what? Those are just tax hikes on Americans. It's just higher prices. Am I right about that?
Yes, absolutely. People
I'm
don't get
reason to
it.
talk about egg prices. Egg prices are up 27% from the time that Donald Trump entered office. And guess what? 42% of the eggs that we import come from Canada. Someone said, uh-oh. And that's exactly right. We are in a world of hurt already because of high grocery prices that we see, and these tariffs are just going to make things worse.
Communication is essential when getting out the Dems' message. Up to now, the Democrats have not done an adequate job messaging.
True.
Yes, true.
What is the plan to modernize the party's communication method?
Who's in charge?
Is there another question? Okay, here's my thought on with regard to what we need to do more of and what should we do less of. In terms of what we need to do more of, we need to. This is not a political town hall, but what I see with Republicans and Democrats who are successful in messaging is they are not fearful about speaking anywhere. Whether it's on Fox, whether it's on a YouTube podcast. Is that right? Yeah, I guess there are YouTube podcasts.
Yeah.
And then there are all kinds of other media which are now gobbling up the media landscape. It's not just cable TV, okay? Not only that, but I think that, in my humble opinion, it's important whether you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat, that you first address whatever are the pain points that people are feeling, even at the same time that you want to, then talk to them about other issues. And so, to me, the economy is in really bad shape right now.
Headed for a recession.
I think, as you know, if you've looked at your 401k, 301, 401k is going down. The stock market's going down. Prices are going up. Business uncertainty is at an all-time high. Small business people are calling me all the time and saying, look, I don't know whether to hire these people, and I don't know if that investment is going to happen in my company because of what's happening with tariffs. So I think that is the issue that I focus on most of my time at this point because real people are being affected. If I can focus on that and offer solutions and do something about that, they'll listen to me on other topics as well. I think that's part of the challenge of communicating right now.
Congressman, one last question before we let you and, of course, our panelists give some final thoughts. Two parts. How can we help, and how can we get young people engaged in the political process?
Good question.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me start with the second part. As far as the young people, we got to get them in the game. We have to get them in the game. And that means, for instance, in my office, if you have any young person or anybody who'd like to serve as an intern, I see some intern. Mom is pointing at her son. Someone just got volunteered. Someone just got volunteered in my office here. But in all seriousness, we possibly have the biggest intern program of any congressional office that I'm aware of. We routinely have lots of people from the district come to Washington, come to Schaumburg, and work in our office. We have an excellent high school internship program and college internship program. So please take advantage of that. That's huge. Okay? You should clap for the interns. They're really good. That's the first part. Secondly, we have to have a why. We have to have a mission. We have to have a reason for what government is going to be doing now and into the future, okay? And to me, I feel that the mission of government has to be to improve the economic station of every person in the country, including in this district. Whether you're working poor, whether you are middle class, whether you're growing a business, we got to get everyone on the up escalator of the economy. And it doesn't matter where anyone comes from. That's crucial. That is to me, that's the essence of America. It doesn't matter who your parents were, where you came from, or the number of letters in your name. There are 29 in mine. Just call me Raja.
We saw the commercial.
You saw the commercial. Let me digress for a second, because on the first time I ran, which was 10 years ago, hard to believe, 10 years ago, so in this business you have consultants, right? And so I go to the consultants, and they're like, everything is looking, you're a great candidate. There's only one issue, and what is it? Your name. So then they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a commercial. I said, that sounds good. And they're like, and it's going to go like this. Call me Raja, call me Raja, call me Raja, 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 Raja. That'll be $2 million.
Yeah.
and I'm like, gulp, okay. And so it's like that that scene out of a poker poker match, and we put all the chips in the middle and bet it all on this one commercial, the Call Me Raja commercial. And I'm like, gulp. And then I go 40 miles away to Bolingbrook, Illinois, which is where I was running a very small business at the time. Went to the Starbucks, and I go up to the drive-through window, and the woman opened the drive-through window, and she's like, "You look like that Raja guy." And I said, "I am that Raja guy." And then she said, "No, you're not." And she slammed the window. I couldn't believe I could possibly live up to that guy. And here I am, 10 years later, 5 terms later, 4 commercials later, all based on that one thing. But going back to your question, how do we get young people? We gotta focus on basics. Get everyone on that up escalator of the economy. We have to address people's real needs, whether they're housing problems, whether they are employment problems, whether it is making sure we have people and able to retire with dignity. And then we have to dream big and go for it all. What am I talking about there? I'm going to say something crazy again. Brian's already smiling because he knows what I'm going to say. Okay? I believe, for instance, that we have to bet big as a country on certain technologies of the future. One of those technologies is fusion energy. I follow this very closely. I'm a little bit of a geek, okay? I got a BS in mechanical engineering. Some people say I practice the BS part now. But fusion energy, at Lawrence Livermore Lab in California, they were able to do one experiment that had a net positive energy output through a fusion reaction. It was in a lab setting, meaning that at a very small scale, they were able to produce more energy from the fusion reaction than the amount of energy it took to fuel or generate the reaction. It was at a small scale. We believe that in 20 to 30 years, we can scale this up into utility scale. Now imagine that for a second. Imagine what fusion power could do, not only in terms of the planet, but ending the cultural debate about greenhouse gas emissions and what type of fuel we should be using. I believe the American government should bet big on fusion energy, among other things. And if it bits, not Bitcoin, on fusion, bet big on fusion, take a little piece of that, and invest it in paying down our debt, which is $36 trillion. We have to reduce it significantly. Take a little portion of that, pay down the debt, take another portion of it, send it to the American people as a royalty check, is their fusion royalty check, and then offer clean power to America and the rest of the world. This is within reach of Americans. Americans can do anything. We've got to make sure we bet on us. We will win. We will win if we bet on ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to live up to the moment. And if we do, anything is within reach. Thank you. She asked if that's my final word. Yes, that's my final word. Let me just say a big, big thank you to all of our panelists. First, Robert Iverson, give him a round of applause for the veteran organization. Diane Stinzak from Age Options. Cecilia Mendoza from the National Immigrant Justice Network. We are here to help you. All of my staff is here tonight, so please come and talk to us if you have any questions, anything that you need. And again, it's the honor of my life to represent you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you do have additional questions or would like to talk to any of our staff members, we will be